Welcome back to another episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. What are we talking about today, Rob?
We're continuing our series on emotions, and today is your favorite topic.
My favorite.
Love, but also it's twin brother or twin sister hate.
Which is not my favorite topic, but it goes hand in hand, which a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah. Jung didn't think of love and hate as opposites. He thought love, the opposite of love was power. But when you ask most people, what is the opposite of love? They invariably say hate. So we're going to go with hate.
We're going to go with hate. And we're going to talk about how the dynamic of romantic relationships, why we're drawn to people that make us hate them or feel this kind of conflict with people that we fall in love with, and then all of a sudden we despise them so much. How could we have those two opposing forces in with one person? Why that happens, and then also we're going to talk about Jung's theory on the Anima Animus, the archetype of love on a soul level, and how you can transcend those love-hate relationships and have real lasting love. So, very popular topic with our audience, and my favorite topic. So,
and we're also thinking of doing a certification on romantic relationships, or I say relationship coaching.
Well, we will be doing one for our graduates of our life coach training, and so we're really excited about bringing those people who have graduated. We're going to give them a specialist in this specific area, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's such a needed skill to have, to be able to coach people through this thing we call falling in love, falling out of love, getting over relationships, etc.
And people need more than just dating tips. When I first started doing personal development, it was all about acting the right way, picking make sure you pick the right person, look out for red flags, and don't make any deadly dating mistakes. Like, don't say the wrong thing on a date, or don't wear the wrong thing. And it was so much pressure to basically building up the persona, and it really doesn't help someone, because on the inside, they're still the same person. They still have the same thoughts and feelings, and they're interacting. And we're going to talk about why we keep attracting the same type of person or the same pattern in relationships. So let's first off start with what is Jung's theory on love?
Yeah, so it's a big topic, so we might have to do a part 2 on this podcast. But in a nutshell, we can think of Jung's ideas as archetypal. So if you ask him about love, he would say it's an archetype that you're dealing with. And the archetype, of course, is the Anima Animus, which we'll talk more about, that is projected onto the beloved person.
And when we say archetype, can you describe that for people? There's a lot of people use that term, but how would you describe it? The way
we use it in a functional way, in a coaching model, is that it means the way the psyche organizes our experience around a certain topic. So if you ask,
I love that.
Yeah, how does the psyche organize our experience of love and romantic love? It organizes and structures that experience through the archetype. And the archetype simply means the original pattern or the original form that then plays out in these patterns.
So it's a universal. Versus what I love with Jung's work, he talks about the personal unconscious, which is our personal experience, and then the archetypal, which is the collective, which really is this thing we're born with, this beyond the surface of our human experience and our current life, that we're born with this wealth of knowledge and information that we operate on, or the psyche operates on. So it's like the fuel underneath all the personal aspects of our life, and so when we fall in love, it feels this really like a really incredible force that you cannot stop. It's like a wave when you see that person, and it's just so intense. And most of the time, it is the most irrational person you should be with. You meet this really nice person who looks great on paper, and you feel no emotion at all. It's kind of flat. And then you meet someone who's completely off, nothing on your list, and they're like the dreamboat. And everyone around you is saying, what do you see in this person? Or are you sure you like this person? And you're just overtaken by this archetypal energy. And that's what when we talked about this archetype, that's what he was saying.
Yeah, that you're possessed by the archetype. Essentially, it takes over your psyche, almost like the ego's pushed out of the way, and this archetype now dominates your psyche, and you're acting in a foolish way, sometimes in a almost like a mad person, possessed by this idea of this other person. You want to be with them, you want to think about them 24 hours a day, you want to write poetry to them, give them music, chocolates, anything, they
text them every 5 minutes.
Yes. Hopefully not every 10 minutes, because that would...
that's not a dating rule.
Right. That would drive them away.
When two people are caught up in it, when it's one-sided, it's really weird because you feel like you're pursuing that person and they're not interested. Yeah. But when two people are caught up in it, it's like that honeymoon stage they talk about, the stage in the Greek stages of philia. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, where
never
you just
bring up stuff you can't remember.
It's the playful stage you're in, and you're just sort of, kind of constant, like you can't stop thinking about that person. And so, a lot of times I've worked with single people for almost 2 decades, and some people are really particular and really guarded. So so what you're really saying is that they don't even allow that animus, because they don't even let that irrational love even overcome them. They get so, the ego basically suppresses it, where they're trying to make a logical decision in love, and they end up not like feeling any connection with anyone. So would you say that would be a suppression of the anima animus, or like a lack of connection or development of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It would depend on the person's personal evolution, how far they've gotten in their individuation process, as Jung would say. How well do they know themselves? Because if a person doesn't know themselves, they're usually projecting the shadow. So the shadow is not the anima animus. It's an archetype that a person has to deal with before they are ready for love. Or ideally, the person who is a good candidate for real love, for really experiencing the fullness of the archetypal love, would have to undergo shadow integration first, because the shadow essentially keeps you in your ego state, in your persona, to where it's all about you. It's essentially about your experience, protecting yourself. Yeah, exactly. And to let another person in when you're kind of building your persona ego, it's kind of scary for the ego.
So could a person have a temporary moment of insanity of the animus seeping in, and then catch themselves really quick and shut down and sabotage?
Precisely. Yeah. I mean, that's why young love rarely works out, because it's premature. They're experiencing the anima animus, but unconsciously. And
underdeveloped. So they haven't developed a relationship to this spiritual aspect of themselves, the soul in them.
Yeah. So the depth of the love is there, but often the infrastructure required to make that relationship work is not there. The emotional maturity, the cognitive understanding is not there, and least of all the social structure for people to stay together and do something together in their lives. Yeah.
So is that why? It just makes me think about the first love. We always have that first love in our life, and it just seems so special because we haven't learned heartache yet, and so we're kind of more open to that animus, but we haven't matured, so it never lasts. So it's kind of that bittersweet experience. of having that first love. It's like an innocence that we have. That first experience of love is like an innocent approach to the anima animus. And then as we have that first heartache, that doesn't work out, and then we start putting up the walls and the boundaries. And
there's also this another perspective is that initial heartbreak is designed to kind of break our ego structure a little bit, right? So that we're not, after that, we're not so sure of ourselves. We start to ask questions. Am I really able to make these choices to pick the right person? And often people kind of get stuck there because they think, that was too painful. I'm not going to risk that again. I'm going to protect myself by either, kind of pushing people away, making sure, finding fault in the people that come into my life, or being very picky, or being very kind of argumentative with them. And so we drive them away essentially.
So we think the other person leaves us, but we end up doing is, like you said, causing arguments.
Yeah.
And being difficult. So they leave us, and then we say, "See, everyone leaves me." And so like kind of confirmation.
I'm sure you saw that a lot in your clients.
Yes. And interesting, when we think we want love consciously, we go out there. I know many people I've worked with, and they get into that relationship, that new relationship, and it's almost like it brings up all this, like what you would, or Jung would call the shadow. We start to, all the incomplete places in us, things that we haven't really resolved within our own personal life, it shows up in that relationship. And it's almost like we don't want to face it. We've been pushing it away for a reason. And then that intensity of that animus or anima pushing you together is like forcing you to look in the mirror, and it's very uncomfortable. At first it's this shiny, beautiful person, and then it becomes very uncomfortable. And then I've seen many women, they just get so scared, like, when are they going to call? And, oh my God, and where's this going? And then all of a sudden it's over. It's like that crash and burn relationship. And they said, what's really weird? I feel relief now. Like, even though I'm heartbroken that this didn't work out, it was so much work to date this person, because I was always questioning myself. It's like a magnifying glass, right?
It is work.
It is work. And so a lot of people think the myth of love is that when you fall in love, everything's perfect, and they just do everything you want them to do. Wasn't I like that?
Well, the biggest myth is that it's unconditional love.
Yeah.
If you look at romantic relationships, they're totally conditional. I mean, you have to behave a certain way in order to make the relationship work. It's not like unconditional where, anything you do is fine and everything goes. I'm going to
date 50 other people. You don't mind. I love you unconditionally.
Right. But we kind of, we're blinded to those things when we fall in love, and we feel that it's unconditional. Because coming from us, we're experiencing the archetype from within. And so to us, it feels like I'm in heaven. I'm experiencing the divine through this person, and that's projection. Now, a lot of people think we by projection that we mean that it's not real. No, it's simply the mechanism. There's got to be a mechanism, because this person that was a few weeks ago a stranger is now the center of your life.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah, there's got to be like an internal shift happening in the psyche that allows for that. It's deeper than
personal. It's like much deeper, right?
That's right. That just overrides a lot of the rationality and the ego structure.
So I remember one time we went to a Buddhist center in Denver, and the guy said to us, he was the teacher at the time, said there's three types of people. I love you, I hate you, and I don't care. And he said, and the love you and I hate you are the same person. And it's that that there's a lot of energy. So when there's a lot of energy of love, there's a lot of potential for hate. And you see this when you with celebrities. you project all this, like, I love this celebrity, and then they do something bad, then I hate this celebrity, and then we tear them down, and then we build them back up again, and the comeback, and we're rooting for them again, and when they reach the top, we want to tear them down again. It's a cycle that we all go through with, and that relationship too. We fall in love so deeply, and then when it's not matched, or all of a sudden we start to see our own shadow in that relationship, where we don't love ourselves enough, and then we start to hate that person, or they leave us, and then we really hate them. And it's like, how could you love someone so much, and then in a flash have that love turn to hate? It's the same energy. It's just your mind starts to flip its story around that person and what they mean.
Yeah, because I mean, from the individual perspective, you're saying I'm giving you my best in love, and then if you don't love me the way I want you to love me, or what I expect, shame on you, right? Mm-hmm. And that starts that resentment, and resentment is like a light form of hate. It turns, or it has the potential to turn into real hate. And even aggression. We know from statistics, violence in marriages and relationships is rampant because people don't understand these principles, right? They're projecting all these expectations onto the other person and expecting the person to fulfill these unreasonable expectations because they're coming from deeper archetypal elements in the psyche. And we're just humans. We're going to be fallible. We're going to make mistakes, and we're going to disappoint each other. And that disappointment then often leads to that resentment and that hate.
And when we think about that resentment and hate, it's really a mirror. We're really, everything that we hate about that other person is what we resent somewhere about ourselves. And so the ego can't take all that hate and criticism, so it has to find a way to project it. It will not survive if it starts seeing this is me. So it's a way to like move out that energy. Also the love. For us, when I used to do hypnosis, and I used to have people like imagine their ideal partner, and I was, it had my office, and they were sitting in front of me, they would all cry when they were meeting the partner. There was so much emotion there. It was like, so we have this really incredible like tenderness that happens in ourselves, and it's almost overwhelming for us to feel love, just as much as to feel hate. So I think that when someone really likes us and they come on too strong, the defenses naturally come up because you can't even trust it. So how do you let someone in your life? Like how do you transcend? I don't want to bypass, but transcend that kind of fear, the ego's fear. How do you really have a true connection and get the ego out of the way so you can really feel it?
Yeah.
Feel a true love.
Yeah. So ideally, if we were restructuring society and romantic norms in order to make it work, we would have people undergo that shadow process first, integrating their own shadow. Mm-hmm. Now, what that means is they have to face what they've unconsciously pushed away about themselves, because that's in the unconscious. And as long as that's in the unconscious, it's projected onto the other person. And usually because the partner in the relationship is a convenient target for projection, they're the ones that get the projection of the shadow. When a person hasn't done their shadow work, it's the other person's fault, obviously, right? If it's not me, it's not my fault. It has to be this other person that's in my life, and they take the brunt of those shadow projections. So when a person integrates their shadow, then they're no longer projecting. Then that love experience can be like a real transformation. Like Jung says, that chemistry that happens transforms both people, and everyone is better for it. But you're being your true self in that moment. Exactly. You're not projecting your shadow.
So for those of people who don't know what shadow is, I think we need to define that. So early in life, we're supposed to build up the ego, and Jung talked about the second half of life is where we let go of the ego. It's a natural process that we all go through. So the first half of life is really building up this a persona, this mask that we interact with the world, and we learn to be liked and nice and get along, and we have our little things that happen to us along the way. And so we learn, okay, well, this mask works better and this mask works better. And I don't like this aspect of personality or human personality, so I reject that. And we often in our family life, we see, I don't want to be cruel or I don't want to be critical, so I'm going to put that in my shadow. And so basically it's this unconscious repression. It's a repression that's unconscious. And we end up going to relationships, as Chris Rock would say, bringing our representative, not our true self. And we're trying to uphold this persona. You go on any of the apps, what do you see as persona, 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 persona? And then you're looking for another persona, persona who matches your age, your looks, your education, your income level, your personality. You think, oh, let's find someone I'm compatible with. But meanwhile, this unconscious part of us is just, it's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. And then when we meet that person, we match up on that persona. And then the shadow, which is the things that we reject about ourselves, we start to see in the other person. Because this part of us, Jung says, wants to live with us, wants to be a part of our life. It's not separate. So it's a calling for integration. And integration doesn't mean healing it or getting rid of it. Integrating means actually accepting both sides of the coin, just like with love and hate. They're two sides of the same coin. So it's all parts of ourselves. We cannot possibly be in an intimate relationship with perfection. You cannot. You have to be raw. It has to get ugly. It has to get vulnerable. And that messiness is what brings people close. And it's the opposite of what we assume. We assume if we do everything right, people won't reject us. But actually, if we do things wrong and someone who really loves us accepts those really unsavory parts of ourselves, that's real love, right? Because it's really not who we are. It's just conditioned patterns. So let's talk about what we learned in applying Jung's model in coaching people through relationships. What was your experience? Well, I remember you showing me when I first started doing love coaching years ago. You showed me, and I had my book, Let Love In, came out, and it was all about like more cognitive behavioral. And you said, you should check this out. And I heard of Jung, but I never heard of Anima, Animus. And you showed me a video on it. And I said, oh, Rob, can you teach a class with me for the single people in my group about this? And as soon as you introduced it, people were blown away. I was blown away by it. And so for me, it just takes this whole dating tip behavior, thinking positive and building up the ego aspect of love coaching and really take it to another level where you're really working on the soul level and helping people really have meaningful connection with themselves, their own soulfulness, so they can connect with someone else. And I just think for me, it was so beautiful. And our clients loved it because we started applying active imagination and visualization for them to connect with this archetype and see it in dreams. And it just became a more whole rounded experience to approach love that they weren't conscious of. And that's the key. I think a lot of people try to make rational decisions in love and try to figure out, why do I keep hitting these same patterns? But the animus in dreams, or anima, really gives them the clues and gives them the information that's missing on a conscious level.
Yeah. I was surprised that because we were trying to stay pretty close to Jung's model of individuation, of shadow work, of anima, animus, but society has evolved, right? People have changed. The norms of romantic relationship and how it's done, courtship and bonding and pairing, it's changed completely. Now a lot of things are up in the air. But what I found was, and this was surprising on both aspects, that the model still works. The deeper psychic structures are still in place. People still project the same way. They still go through the shadow work in very similar ways as Jung describes. But the anima animus appears different.
It's not just the traditional woman or the traditional man.
That's right. And of course, he was working with people or started working with people in the Victorian era, and then, up into I think he passed away in 1961 or somewhere, sometime around there. But things have changed a lot.
And, relationships are different. There was always been gay relationships, but now it's more people are more out and living their true self versus, trying to conform to society and making that hidden, because 100 years ago it was really not as acceptable. And now it's more welcoming, and there's more liberal society. And then also transgender. So we're dealing with a lot of different types of feminine and masculine, and also women are taking on more masculine roles in business and maybe leading the household while the man stays at home, or helps the woman with projects, and so it's a different dynamic. Women are kind of coming into power. So when we think about the Animus, it has a different quality than the knight on the shining horse that's going to come, and the white horse, and rescue you like Prince Charming. It's actually, it becomes a force that the woman can harness and use in the world, and use it and balance out the relationship, where the husband isn't the sole container for all her masculinity, which is, in the Victorian times, you see the woman like, oh, I can't step over the wet water, put the coat down, and everything was so like, women can't lift things and all that stuff. And now, like, we're just so different. So these social roles that masculine, feminine ideas that Animus were kind of talked about in different Jungian circles. Now we're going to a different level.
Yeah. So what persists, what's still there intact, is that these are universal archetypal forces. So what works for us in applying it in a coaching model has been this idea that they're more like the yin and yang, these kind of universal forces that humans embody, in a sense, right? We're created out of that model of the universe that operates on this duality, but the way individuals manifest it and experience it is very unique. And Jung continually talks about this, that there's a tension between our individual experience of the world and the universal archetypal elements. They're not going to be identical in each one of us because we're individuals. So we're individuals playing out universal patterns. That's the contradiction that a lot of people have trouble with. They want it to be it's either individually, right, what I'm experiencing is the truth and the way it should be, or it's either archetypal and everyone should experience it that way. But it's somewhere in between. And it's something, maybe a third element that comes in, that it's a combination of those two things, that we get to experience universal archetypal elements in our own individual way.
So when we say a woman has the unconscious element in her is the animus, and the man is the unconscious anima, the feminine in him, the symbol, like we were talking about, doesn't necessarily mean a man's going to see this goddess woman and a woman's going to see the knight. It has it could have a more ambiguous kind of androgynous looking character.
That's right. And we let the unconscious guide us. And in working with our clients, we let the unconscious emerge and tell us what's going on in the unconscious, because it's like that mirror effect. Whatever's going on at the conscious level, whatever the person is aware of, the unconscious is playing the opposing role. So if a person is very rational, very put together at the social conscious level, their unconscious is often very artistic and expressive in the unconscious, and it balances that individual out.
So would a woman have an anima in her unconscious?
She can.
Because that would be against, because we would say that according to Jung's theory, anima is the conscious of a woman and animus is the unconscious. Would it ever be flipped?
Well, again, it would be an individual case. It simply would balance out, let's say...
Like if she rejected all femininity
right.
and she was very manly, she would probably put the anima and embody the animus.
That's right.
Okay.
And the unconscious would simply, as she approaches the unconscious through dream work, through working with emotions and triggers, what would arise would be the balancing component. Mm.
And so when we think about why is romantic love around anyway, besides having babies, this force within us is our soul, our soulful self, beyond our personal history, beyond the personal unconscious, this deeper self is pushing upward. It's trying to be realized and be a part of this conscious experience. We're just not conscious of it. It's not unconscious of itself. It's alive and doing autonomous. And what we want to do is connect with it. And so it's always going to push us toward itself. So what will happen is that projection is a way for us to see it out there and then draw us in and try to get us to kind of turn in. Even though it's projecting outward, it's a way to create this dynamic outside so we can basically come to terms with our own soul, because we can't really look inside without the external as a way for us to work through it. And is that why the purpose of relationships was like, if we're not going to have children, why would we have a relationship? Why bother?
Yeah.
It serves their personal growth.
Yeah. So we just think, again, to a basic relationship or a traditional relationship between a man and a woman. They're both projecting on each other. The man is projecting his anima onto the woman and believes or experiences this woman to be kind of beyond the normal experience of life.
She's just not an ordinary.
Not
girl.
an ordinary
She's special,
person.
right? It's
That's
that
right.
special idea.
That's right. The woman is projecting her animus onto the man. Mm-hmm. Now, what this means is Jung called this the soul image, right? The animus is the soul image, meaning you're experiencing your soul in the three-dimensional reality of our life.
It's so amazing, so magical when it happens.
And again, why would we need this? Because that's the only way we would allow somebody into our life completely, where they were a complete stranger just a few months ago. Now they become part of you. And the only way to do that is if you have that soulful experience of falling in love. And
like we said, interferes with that is if you haven't done your shadow, integrated your shadow, it'll first be this amazing connection, and it could last one night, it could last months, it could last a year, and then you get married, and then all of a sudden they leave the toothpaste off, or you hear them like blow their nose or something very benign, and all of a sudden they trigger you, or they come home late from work and your mind is thinking, oh no, and you're seeing more of your shadow. And the reason we don't leave, and and like that powerful force that keeps us together forces us to work with our shadow, forces us to see. But we have to be conscious that it's not communicating to the other person, please don't do that. It's looking within yourself and saying, why does this irritate me? Because everything that irritates us about others is showing us something about ourselves. And to understand that, and then be in a relationship where I could say to you, I'm really triggered right now when you did that. Let me work through. I know it's something in me. I want to investigate it. But to be honest with you about it, and you can be honest with me, that's a soulful relationship. That's where you're not just projecting and resenting. And telling your girlfriends or your parents about how irritating your husband is or wife. You work with it directly. And then if people don't, they end up getting divorced. They end up finding someone else to project that animus or anima onto, and they move on, and it's like those serial love people that they fall in love, and then they stay there for a while, and then they find someone else when things get too difficult.
That's another big misperception or myth in modern culture, is that they believe romantic love is that initial stage of infatuation. They think that that's the way they define romantic love, that it's this infatuation with this other person, that you're putting them up on a pedestal and you're projecting all this divinity onto them. That's one stage of love or romantic relationships, but it's meant to go in a progression towards higher stages.
So it's supposed to evolve.
It's supposed to evolve.
And when it doesn't, when it's going through that dip of the loss of that infatuation, people think it's over, but that's really when the good stuff starts to happen.
Yeah.
Because in the friction of the shadow work, you're actually going to go deeper and more intimate with someone than if you just said, oh, it's gone, got to find someone else. I got to find someone else who gives me that feeling again.
That's right. That's when people say, I fell out of love, because that initial infatuation is not there anymore. It's like those rockets that go in stages, right? The initial one is meant to get you into orbit, but that's just like one stage of it. Then you're supposed to evolve into kind of a more of a commitment, a more mature kind of relationship.
And so where are we now with love and hate? What are we doing in the world, and how can we look at that dynamic of love and hate and grow from it and learn from it?
Yeah, so things are up in the air in a lot of ways. Societies change so rapidly now that few people have been able to keep up with really what's going on in culture, in gender issues, and men and women, how they relate. How do you deal with, like you say, these other gender identities, and what is the psychology of all that? But in general, what's happening is that these crisis points, these rapid points of change, are opportunities for us to really think through and redefine how relationships should be done. And it's up to all of us to think these things through. What do we know from psychology? What do we know from philosophy? What do we know from the Greeks, from Hindu scriptures about what's going on in this thing we call love and hate? And how do we deal with it? Again, because if we're not aware, then we end up, these forces will play out through us. And like Jung says, they're autonomous. The archetypes will come in and make a wreck of your life if you're not consciously relating to them.
Do you see this too with, I know a lot of our audience are teachers and coaches and, thought leaders and wanting to help others, a lot of people in personal development. And when you become, well-known or a leader, your people will love or hate you. Like it's like they can love you, they get so infatuated with you, and they think you're the best teacher in the world, best coach in the world, and then that can turn to hate as well. And it's like both of them, it's like you care. And so if you think you hate someone or you think you love someone, there's that flip side that's there all the time. And the key is that when we're in that love-hate dynamic, it's attachment. Is our egos attached to something? It's thinking that the person can give me something I don't have, and then when we don't get it, we get resentful, and it's just like with love. So any relationship can have that love-hate dynamic. Parents, like you love your parents, but then you hate them at the same time. You resent them when you're teenagers, and it's just that all that energy. And so I'd rather have someone hate me because I know they really care than have someone not care. Like, I don't care about her. Have that benignness to it. It's more when someone has a really strong emotion towards you, there's love there too.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with the archetype itself. All archetypes, according to Jung, have a light and a dark side, not a positive and negative. Like at the conscious, rational level, we're always used to thinking in terms of black and white, good and bad. But the archetypes are beyond that. They're part of the unconscious, which is the opposite of rationality. It's more like instinctual, more like intuitive. They do not operate on the dualistic principle, but they do have those universal forces at play, meaning they are creative and destructive. at once, at the same time. They contradict each other, but that's the power of the archetype. Jung says that's what gives them the power, right?
Is that like a frenemy? They're the frenemies, like, I love her, but I hate her, your best friend. And
yes.
You kind of have that. Anyone you're close to, anyone you built an intimate relationship with, you can't always love them. You can't always think they're perfect. There's always something that's going to irritate you, or they're going to let you down. That's just part of being in a relationship, a real relationship.
That's it. It's the real relationship, which is an archetypal universal force that you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And the best we can do is understand that and be in relationship with the archetype itself. In other words, the way the relationship is going to play out externally between you and your partner has a lot to do with the way you relate to your animus. That relationship that you have with the archetype is reflected outward, and you experience it in your romantic relationship, but it's really an internal experience that you're having. Your readiness for love, your fear of it, your respect for it, your relationship with it, all that is playing out in these romantic relationships that you're having.
So love and hate go together.
Yeah.
You have to do your shadow, integrate your shadow to really have a true experience of love. And you can't do shadow work on your own. You absolutely need a coach to do that. You can't see yourself. It's just too hard. It's too difficult. Your ego will trip you up and help you try to bypass and try to do an intellectual understanding of it. And then you're still back to square one. So you really need a coach for that. And then really having the tools to understand the animus and how to work with that within your own psyche, but recognizing that when you're falling in love with someone, you're seeing your soul in that other person. It's this, your own soul is being projected. It's one, it's not separate from you. It's like you're seeing yourself as a mirror. And everything you love and hate about someone is pointing to parts of yourself. So you have a quote?
I have a quote by Robert Johnson, a Jungian analyst who writes... he wrote that he and she and we. Yeah. 3 different books on relationships. So he says most men get their deepest conviction of self-worth from a woman, wife, mother, or if they are highly conscious from their own anima. The woman sees and shows the man his value by lighting the lamp. That right there kind of explains what's happening. In order for a man to be lit from within, he needs that external projection, that external presence of the woman.
To see his light?
Yes, because the woman can see it in him where he can't. But that experience of connecting with this anima then brings it out. It's already within us. Just as for a woman, the animus, the soul image is already within her, but she also needs that experience of love to become a light into the world. And we do not light a lamp to put it under a bush, as the old proverb says. We light the lamp to show the world the light, right? So people can see.
That's beautiful. And I've heard too that in with that is that for women, it's easier for her to connect to her animus because she's more, she has more masculine qualities on the conscious level. She has more access to it than a man. So the man actually needs a woman more than a woman. Is that true? To find their soul?
Well, I'd say it's equal, but
okay.
You know, you've worked a lot more actually on relationship issues with people. Your experience might be different, and again,
it seems easier for a woman. I worked with men and women. It seemed easier for a woman to connect with that animus because she's already has, like, these women I work with are high-powered career women, successful. You know, they've made a life for themselves. They're not this, like in the Victorian time, like need someone to put a coat over the water. But where a man, they don't have an aspect of femininity where they can identify with in most cases, unless they're an artist. I found that artists and creative men are typically more, it's easier for them. And then the more left brain man is harder for him to connect to the animus. He needs that other woman more.
Yeah. I mean, in general, the culture has moved so far in the opposite direction, right? Now the paradigm is more neuroscience and looking at the external so much.
Yeah.
We've lost touch with our nature, our psyche, our dreams. But that's our work, right? We are here to emphasize that we don't need to abandon science in order to understand the unconscious mind. They're both useful. They're just simply different aspects of our psyche.
So when someone says they found their soulmate, they really found their soul. They're finding their soul. They're rediscovering their own soul.
That's it. And the only way you can really love and have a deep connection with another human being is if you have that love from within you with the archetype, in other words, with that relationship with the animus.
It's the dynamic between you and the animus dictates the dynamic between you and the outer animus. So if you're having an outer animus experience with a man, you know that your relationship within is different too. So great topic. Well, this was wonderful. Next week, we are going to be talking about your favorite topic, which is shame. I'm kidding. We're going to talk about shame and the root of shame and how it's actually not a bad thing to have some shame, but how it runs our life and really it's the root of the ego is to reject shame and try to avoid it at all costs. So we're going to talk about how to work with that emotion and
healthy shame,
how to have healthy shame. But also feel more empowered when you feel that shame and how to deal with it in a less fixing way and more of an empowering way. So we will see you next week on Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. Thank you for joining us. And don't forget to subscribe below here and not miss another episode.
See you next time.
Take care, everyone.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.